world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
And we are back here on the Analytical Iowan Podcast. It is Sunday, March 15th. It is the Ides of March. And of course, we've got a lot to talk about because there's always a lot to talk about. Now, recording this later in the day than I would have liked. Ended up doing a 2-hour live for yesterday's podcast. And then ended up going to bed late, got up, went to work. And by the time Saturday was done, I was struggling to have the energy to end up getting the podcast in, and I ended up jumping in. Went to bed early, got up, and late I ended up joining Pamela's live over on TikTok. And I don't know how, but somehow I was able to sit on that panel for over 6 hours. Didn't intend to be there for 6 hours, had great conversation. And of course, filled in some gaps. So, of course, having to work a full-time job beyond doing content creation, had to go to work Sunday and did that. So by the time I got around to actually recording for the night, it was much later. Now, hopefully, I won't run into any snags and I'll be able to get this up yet today. If not, it'll go up sometime tomorrow. We are experiencing a blizzard here. You may hear wind in the background. Even though I've shut it a couple of times, the wind has still caught my screen door. You may hear that bang against the railing on the front porch in the background. We're dealing with 25, 30 mile an hour winds. Not a lot of snow. Realistically, there was a lot of precipitation, but a lot of it came down before it cooled off as rain. Just made things slick, and the little bit of snow that stuck was all that fine, powdery stuff added in with the wind, and it just made visibility very, very crappy. So dealing with that, typical for Iowa this time of year, at least it used to be. It's been a lot milder lately. Hopefully, this is one of our last major snow events of the year, but that's what I'm dealing with. We've got a lot to talk about because there's always a lot to talk about. Now, yesterday I ended up doing that 2-hour live, and that was even longer than I normally would go for a live by, half hour, 45 minutes. But I ended up deciding to go with it and keep that going because we were having such a good conversation. And there goes the door. Doing the best to keep that shut, but it's just not working. Wind's a little too strong. It picks up, it catches just right. Anyway, we've got a lot to talk about. Now, I haven't had a lot of other podcasts up this week. It's been kind of a rough week for me getting things going. Life itself got in the way a little bit. So dealing with that. And rather than try to record a bunch of podcasts when I had time and just try to catch up and post them all together, I just decided to try to start back over and get caught up. So I'm going to try to get back ahead and go forward. Now, we have a lot of things going on with the Iran war, and we've never been given a full, clear answer as to why we are at war with Iran. And MAGA is trying to make it out like they do every time a Republican declares war, that you're somehow anti-American if you disagree with the war. That's part of it. They're defending the war, and it is a war, whether Congress has approved it or not. In my mind, it is still a war. We have active casualties. We hear they are sending Marines into the area, that they are looking at boots on the ground. And if they go boots on the ground, then you can't deny it's a war. I mean, Congress never declared Korea or Vietnam an official war. They were technically police action sanctioned by the UN, but history still records them as a war. And I think that's what this is going to be too. Now, Donald Trump wants us to believe that we're basically at mission accomplished and he's going to be able to talk his way out of it. And that's really not the case here. Um, we're not anywhere close to being done with Iran. Now, he may want to be done because it is, uh, you know, disadvantageous to him. It's going to hurt him in the midterms. It's hurting his poll numbers. The stress is hurting his health. And he only did it to distract from the Epstein files. He did it to distract the uh, from the failing economy, from the fact that his foreign policies are not working. And he did everything he said he would, or that he blamed Barack Obama for, all the way back during Obama's first term, and said the president. This is Donald Trump talking about Barack Obama. He said the president would go to war with Iran because his poll numbers were bad. He said the president would um, end up going to war with Iran to prove he is a tough guy, and that he would go to war because he's a failed negotiator. Well, Donald Trump is all of those things. And I think the reason he accused Barack Obama is because, typical with Donald Trump and a lot of MAGAs, they see what they would do in that situation and they accuse everybody else of doing the same thing they would do. So Donald Trump looking at the situation going, well, if it was me, I'd go to war with Iran to solve the situation. And that's realistically uh, what he did when he was put into that situation. Now, we are hearing that prior to going into the Iran war, that Donald Trump was briefed by General Dan Kane, um, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and was told ahead of time that if he went after Iran, Iran would close the Strait of Hormuz. And Donald Trump did what Donald Trump always did and went, it's not going to happen. He thought he knew better. Donald Trump does this with everything. Now, he was told by military leaders that the Strait of Hormuz would be closed. Okay. He ignored it. He chose to ignore it because he doesn't believe in listening to educated people. Listen to Donald Trump talk. And I'm going to see if I can pull up a list here of things that Donald Trump has said. Here's a list. I found it. Donald Trump always says, whenever he talks about a subject, I'm going to start reading down this list. It's not in the best format, but uh, you ever listen to him talk? And I know it's hard. Listening to Donald Trump's speeches give me a migraine. It insults my intelligence, and I feel like I lose brain cells every time I listen to him. But if you listen to him talk and listen to him boast, this is typical narcissist. He knows more about everything than everybody on every subject. Nobody knows business like me. Nobody knows more about taxes and income than I do. Nobody knows more about campaign finance than I do. These are all quotes from Donald Trump, by the way. Nobody knows more about banks than I do. Nobody knows more about trade than I do. I understand tax laws better than almost anybody. Um, let's see. No one knows much more about technology, this type of technology, certainly than I do. Nobody knows more about technology than I do. Nobody knows more about environmental impact statements more than me. I know more about renewables than any human being on earth. I understand the power of Facebook maybe better than almost anybody. Nobody in the history of this country has ever known so much about infrastructure as Donald Trump. No one knows more about construction than I do. I know more about steel worker than anyone that's ever run for office. I know more about nuclear weapons than he'll ever know. Let me see. There's more. Um, Trump says, I know more about golf than Obama does. Uh, and then Donald Trump, of course, has said, the truth is, I'm actually a very modest person. Very modest. It's true. And there's even more. He talked back in COVID times, he talked about knowing more about viruses than anybody. He knew more about vaccines than anybody. He knew more about medicine than anybody. Donald Trump brags all the time. And when people um, know what's going on, tell him something he doesn't like, he dismisses their knowledge as being wrong, right? You have to go in and you have to approach Donald Trump a certain way. We heard all the way back in his first term that his aides were having to write his briefings as one-page briefings, and he doesn't even read those anymore. That they were looking at now, formatting them like Fox News clips, a TikTok style news clip, 90 seconds to 2 minutes of a talking head talking to him and telling him what he needs to know in simplified terms because he's struggling to even understand written instructions at this point. But Donald Trump claims to know more than anything and everything about every subject than anybody around him. So when his chairman of the Joint Chiefs comes and tells him, Donald, going to war with Iran's a bad idea, and if he's already made up his mind, he's going to dismiss it. He's going to ignore the intelligence and say, well, you're just wrong. Well, look what happened. Okay. They told him that Iran had the capability to block the Strait of Hormuz, which 20% of the world's oil and natural gas come through that strait. And, oil and gas prices have gone up. Gas or oil, I believe, is up around $100 a barrel again, if not over $100 a barrel. I think it ended over on Friday, at least for certain blends. Not an oil and gas expert. That would be Mr. Global. But he's he was told and he ignored it. And this is the person that MAGAs cheer. Now, why do they cheer him? Well, because he talks like them. Okay. He talks on about a third to fourth grade level, maybe fifth on some days, but it's getting worse. And, as the dementia, gets worse, you're going to see him start to slip back and he starts to regress. You're going to start to see him using a smaller and smaller vocabulary. And MAGA loves it because one of the things they equate education with and using a large vocabulary and using the correct terminology, they equate it with talking down to people. Okay, that's how they view it. I've had numerous conversations with MAGA, um, where they feel like educated, specifically educated Democrats, but educated people in general, um, will be talking down to them just for speaking about things they know, right? If you're using more than about a three-syllable word, and even three-syllable words are, for some of MAGA, is getting pretty big. Um, they view you using the educated lingo as talking down, that you're trying to prove you're better. And that's one of the things Democrats need to work better on. Was on a live, I think it was with Will, but I could be wrong. We were talking about the way to talk to farmers. I think it was Will, now that I think about it. And he said the easiest way you could get farmers to come around and vote against Republicans is go simple. Are you better off than you were under Joe Biden? Are you making more money? No fancy words, no uh no big words, nothing they got to go look up in a dictionary. Plain and simple fact. Are you making more money? Are you better off? And that will drive the MAGA to think about things. Now, getting MAGA to come over to our side is going to be always a long shot, right? We're not going to convince about 30 to 35% of this country, the diehard MAGA cult. They are going to have to come there on their own. Now, there's nothing we can say to them, nothing we can do to convince MAGA that they are uh, being lied to. They need to get there on their own about everything. Now, uh, what's going to probably happen, and we already see some of it, right? You hear people in red states coming out going, well, I didn't get nearly as much food stamps as I used to. Where'd my food stamp money go? Well, that would be Donald Trump and the one big beautiful bill cutting food stamp benefits. You hear people here in Iowa. I'm hearing people complain that food stamps are harder to use. Now, let me pull this up here. There it is. Food stamp changes in Iowa. Um, so, key changes. Under the new guidelines, SNAP benefits will no longer cover taxable food items. This includes products such as candy, soda, sugary beverages that contain less than 50% fruit or vegetable juice. Now, I said it was 100, but apparently it's less than 50. Either way, most of your juice blends that you go to the store and get, um, like Juicy Juice is a major brand that uh people like and that kids like, but it's only like 30%, I think, or 10% juice. It's not, it's, you know, juice concentrate and then it's mixed with water so it goes farther. And it's just more, it's juice flavored water. It's not that it's unhealthy, although sometimes it is because they add a lot of sugar to it, um, and sweetener, but that would be it out. Anything less than 50% juice is now considered not prepared for that is not food stampable. Additionally, some prepared foods and snacks that are not exempt from state sales tax will also be excluded. Um, it's to focus on healthier options, fruits, vegetables, bread, and dairy products. They claim it is to get you to eat healthier, right? To encourage healthier eating. Except here's the thing with this. That is the Republican government, again, as they do with almost everything, they sit there and they're telling you they know more about what you should be doing than you do. They want to control your life. They tell you they are for small government, but they're actually not. Um, they are telling you what you should be able to get. Let's see here. I'm looking to see if there's any more. Uh, no, that's not the one I wanted. If there's a more list, because we had heard going in that it was. Oh, all right. Well, this wasn't what I was looking for, but five food stamp recipients sue the U.S. Department of Agriculture on March 11th, 2026, to undo Trump administration efforts to prevent them from using benefits to buy products such as sugary drinks, energy drinks, and candy. The lawsuit targets USDA approved waivers in 22 states that ban SNAP recipients from purchasing sugary drinks, candy, and prepared desserts, arguing that the Trump administration violated the laws that authorize SNAP benefits and govern how policy changes must be made. Case is still ongoing. It just happened. So that is interesting. In Iowa, considered to have the most restrictive waiver, SNAP benefits can only use benefits for foods and beverages not subject to state sales tax. Under Iowa's waiver, SNAP users can buy a Twix bar because it contains flour, which is not taxable, but not a Snickers bar. Other non-taxable foods include whole foods like fresh produce. West Virginia, however, restricts soda, which it describes as a carbonated drink that contains water, sweetener, and flavoring. Nebraska is restricting soda and energy drinks. Indiana bans soft drinks and candy. Like it's such a hodgepodge. This lawsuit, and this was not what I was looking for. I was looking for a better list of the things that were denied here in Iowa. But the complaint also alleges real-world harms. A plaintiff with type 1 diabetes stated, "For me, certain drinks can be life-saving. When my blood sugar drops, I need something like juice or a sugary drink immediately to raise it and prevent a dangerous situation." A Tennessee plaintiff and full-time caretaker for her daughter would no longer be able to purchase the foods her daughter, who has ARFID, which is avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, can safely eat. Now, I know a little bit about ARFID. I don't know a lot, but apparently with ARFID, it is a mental disorder where your brain does not recognize certain things as food. There are only certain things your brain recognizes as actual food. And it doesn't matter what you put in front of a person with that diagnosis, they're not going to eat it. They're not just being picky. Their brain is telling them that either that it's not food or that it's poison or something like that. These are the types of people who, when a company changes its recipe, they may never eat that food again. And limiting what they can buy on food stamps is a way to cause adverse reactions and cause them to potentially suffer because they won't eat. Another Iowa plaintiff described the new rules as nearly impossible to navigate. "When I shop for food, I have to read ingredient lists on everything I buy to figure out if I can use SNAP to buy it. I still get to the register and only be told I cannot use SNAP to buy everything I have selected." I mean, this whole lawsuit, it hopefully is going to go and kick these laws out of place. But as I was saying, this is the Republicans trying to tell you they know more about what you should be doing than you do. It's something they have done for years, for decades. They pushed to ban gay marriage. Now, gay marriage was made legal nationwide in 2015 under the Obergefell decision, I believe. I believe that was 2015. Obergefell v. Hodges. Uh, yeah, 2015. But prior to that, they were trying to tell you for years, and they still do, that allowing members of the LGBTQ community to get married is somehow wrong. And I think part of that is because of religion. And it's not because their religion says it's wrong. And what I mean by that is, yes, they're using religion as their justification. But I think part of it has to do, at least on the voter level to some extent, that a large number of them actually believe by making it legal, we are trying to tell them that in their religion, their church should have to recognize those marriages. No, that's not what this is. That's not what the Obergefell decision was doing. It was only about granting legal protection for those people who wanted to get married, who fell into the formerly marginalized groups. They still are, but for now different reasons of the LGBTQ community. By letting them get married, it gives them legal protections for certain things. For example, inheritance. Okay. If you are a married couple, doesn't matter about your orientation, and you pass, most states have automatic uh, survivorship or inheritance, whatever the word is you want to use there, where the surviving spouse automatically gets everything that the other spouse owned. For example, if you own property, you own a car, you have a joint bank account, things like that. When you pass, your surviving spouse would get all of those things. They wouldn't have to jump through legal hoops to prove ownership, and you wouldn't have to go through and do a bunch of uh, things to set up a will or a trust or whatever you would have to do if you were going to say just give it to another unmarried relative. Um, Not to mention you have insurance claims, right? Where it is easier if you are married to claim your partner, regardless again of gender, on your insurance. You have a case where uh, two people are now married, they can get insurance through work. And there you go. Um, where before they would have to either get separate policies, or sometimes if the one partner was not working or didn't work at a job that had insurance, potentially even with the Affordable Care Act, especially now that the ACA subsidies have expired, would have to pay large sums of money. And this was about extending the same legal rights to people. We didn't care when the Supreme Court passed Obergefell, they never said that in your church, your local priest, parson, minister, reverend, whatever term you want to use, rabbi, whatever term would fit that. And because for the most part, the ones you are hearing squawking the loudest against it is still Christians. uh, we're not saying your church has to acknowledge it, has to accept it, has to approve it, or perform the ceremony. They don't have to do anything. They still have the personal choice to say no, especially in a religious setting. Now, of course, MAGA likes to come up with these hypotheticals. And one of the things they came up with was the Colorado cake decision, where a woman who didn't even own a bakery sued on a hypothetical saying, well, if I start my bakery and a gay couple comes in and they want me to make a cake, I have to accommodate them. I can't discriminate. And I don't want to do that. See, what MAGA fails to understand is there are ways they could have still accomplished the same thing. And I've said this for years. Now, this isn't me being insensitive. At least I don't think so. And if I am, let me know in the comments. But if you absolutely are against people getting married, which I am not. I think anybody who wants to get married, if they want to be married, let them, as long as they are consenting adults. And there is no other reason as to why they should not be married. We're talking that they are familial related, um, or that there is some other dynamic as to why they should not be married. But if you are consenting adults and there's no coercion, there is no force, there's no exigent circumstances. As long as they're both willing and they know what they're doing, basically, I don't care. But what this cake decorator could have done, and I said this while this case was going through the courts, well before I was ever on social media. I said, look, they're just dumb. If you don't want to make the cake, all you do is say, we're too busy that weekend. Sorry, we can't do it. Doesn't matter if you have no cakes going out that weekend. Doesn't matter if your schedule is booked free. You just tell them you're busy. If you don't say I'm not doing it because you're a LGBTQ couple, you can refuse service to anyone for almost any reason except protected reasons that would be discriminatory. If you phrase it in a certain way, and maybe I'm wrong on that, but you would be able to say, "Sorry, I'm too busy that weekend. I got conflicting orders that weekend. I can't do it. I don't have the time." You, yeah, maybe you lied, but if that means you can still deny them without actually saying it's because they're members of the community, now problem would be maybe down the road, if everybody starts realizing that's what you're doing, one of two things would happen. Maybe you still get sued, and maybe that does still play out and you have to deal with it. Or maybe the members of the community just quit going to you and trying to get you to bake that cake. You could have at least tried that, but instead you come up with this hypothetical, you sue to the Supreme Court, and try to get the Supreme Court to okay uh, you going ahead and being discriminatory. It's ridiculous, but that's what you get out of MAGA. Now, kind of got way off topic because we started with Iran. I want to go back to Iran for a little bit before I move on to something that came up in the live I did with Pamela the other night. It came up several times. There is a fly flying around me. Hopefully, I got it. Driving me nuts. But and one of the things I wanted to talk about is Donald Trump is lowering the sanctions on Russia, and he's doing that specifically on Russian oil. Why? Because 20% of the world's oil supply is flowing or not flowing right now through the Strait of Hormuz. So he figures if we uh, lessen the burden on oil coming from Russia, and they can start selling it, it's going to offset prices. Same thing that he did with opening the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Now he is releasing a bunch of oil, about I think it was 170 million barrels over the next several months, about what Joe Biden released at the beginning of the Ukraine Russia war, and that Joe Biden took a bunch of shit for, and that he never, MAGA and the Republicans ended up saying, "Hey, that's a bad idea." They were so pissed. Oh, he's depleting our reserves, except for the fact that when he did release the oil, he had actually done it and made the government money because of the price we had bought it at, and he helped keep and stabilize the oil prices and gas prices at the time, as well as made the government money. Now, this is just Donald Trump trying to do it to save his hide because gas prices are going up. And now he's lessening the restrictions on Russia, which means Russia is going to have more money to fund the war in Ukraine. And Donald Trump, being the man of peace, he really doesn't care about peace. That has been confirmed. Um, that he is um, going after anybody and everybody, but he's releasing Russia to sell some of their oil, which is going to give them money to fund their war in Ukraine, which is going to put Ukraine on a tougher path, and it is going to put um, everybody in Eastern Europe in a tougher situation where NATO may have to actually get involved in Ukraine. Now, there have been also some claims going around that Benjamin Netanyahu have has died. I don't believe it. I think he is still alive. Apparently, he hasn't been seen though in a few days. Um, and if that is true, now we will see if he does make public appearances. Apparently, there have been some statements released uh, from the Israeli government saying that they're just rumors. But um, if he is gone, that would change the dynamic because Netanyahu had Donald Trump's ear, and he is one of the reasons why we went into Iran. Basically, uh, Netanyahu was going to go after Iran, and they went to Donald Trump and said, "Look, if we hit Iran, Iran's going to hit you, so you better hit Iran with us because there you go. That way you're preempting them hitting you, so you don't look like you're weak or you don't look like you were caught unprepared." And basically, that was good enough for Donald Trump. And he really thought that they would be able to just roll over Iran, and Iran would give up in about 2 days, and he would be able to, puff out his chest, call it a victory, and move on. But if Netanyahu is gone, that would be a major blow to the Israelis, to the war in the area, and it would be a major blow where Donald Trump and the people around him would have to reconsider what they are doing. Now, one of the things Iran has wanted as part of concessions for ending hostilities has been uh, they want Netanyahu turned over to the ICC. I have not heard that they want Donald Trump turned over yet, but he may be on the list. Now, the United States typically does not uh, recognize. I'm looking it up real quick. I remember. I want to make sure I get this correct. So, the United States does not recognize the ICC primarily over concerns to national sovereignty, the potential for politically motivated prosecutions, and the desire to protect U.S. military personnel from the international jurisdiction. ICC was established by the Rome Statute in '02 to prosecute individuals for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. The U.S. initially signed the Rome Statute in 2000 under Bill Clinton, but never submitted it for Senate ratification. In '02, under George W. Bush, the U.S. formally withdrew its signature, indicating it would not ratify it and did not recognize any obligations toward the court. The U.S. government is concerned that the ICC could infringe upon its sovereignty by asserting jurisdiction over U.S. citizens and officials without consent. This is particularly relevant in military operations where U.S. personnel may be involved in actions that could be scrutinized by the ICC. There are fears that the ICC could be used for politically motivated prosecutions against U.S. officials, which could undermine U.S. foreign policy and military operations. Critics argue that the court lacks sufficient checks and balances to prevent such abuses. Uh, Existing legal framework, U.S. maintains that its own military justice system is capable of investigating and prosecuting any alleged misconduct by its service members. Government believes by allowing the ICC to have jurisdiction over U.S. personnel is unnecessary and could lead to complications in international relations. And the American Service Members Protection Act restricts U.S. cooperation with the ICC and prohibits transfers of classified information to the court. This legislation reflects U.S. commitment to protecting military personnel from ICC actions. Um, Recently, the U.S. has also expressed strong opposition to ICC investigations into alleged war crimes involving U.S. and Israeli actions, viewing these as illegitimate. President Biden criticized the ICC's plans to seek arrest warrants for Israeli leaders, reinforcing the U.S. stance that it does not recognize the court's jurisdiction in such matters. In summary, the U.S. does not recognize the ICC due to a combination of historical decisions, concerns over sovereignty and political motivations, and a belief in its own legal system. Now, one of the things the Democrats could do when they get back in power is they could join the ICC. And obviously, Republicans would lose their mind. But when Democrats get back in power, if they decided to join the ICC, that would send a clear signal to the world that we want to hold even our own accountable for crimes they committed on the world stage. If they've committed war crimes, we want them held accountable. Now, I don't know if that's what the Democrats would do, um, but it is one possibility as we look toward what they can do to fix uh, the um, uh, fix our reputation on the world stage. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about was something that came up several times in Pamela's live, and that is the Save Act versus the Save America Act. First of all, we know what the Save Act is. Basically, the Save Act is the law that the House passed. The Senate has not taken it up. That would require stricter voter ID laws. There are no provisions in the Save Act to get um, to where you could present multiple forms of documentation if your name does not match your birth certificate. For example, if your ID now doesn't match because you changed your name, and there's all kinds of reasons as to why you would change your name. I was under the impression that you could present all of the documentation and they would accept it. Well, apparently, the SAVE Act primarily focuses on voter registration requirements. It mandates individuals provide documentary proof of citizenship when registering to vote in federal elections. Acceptable documents include a passport, birth certificate, military ID with proof of birth, or other government-issued photo ID accompanied by proof of citizenship. Bill also eliminates mail-in and online voter registration unless proof of citizenship is presented in person, which could affect millions of voters who rely on these convenient registration methods. Additionally, the SAVE Act encourages states to use the systematic alien verification for entitlements database, the SAVE database, to verify voter eligibility. Uh, Thing is, states almost always do that. There is very few cases of actual voter fraud. But by requiring people to re-register and put these additional hoops, try to eliminate ways people can vote, it's about disenfranchising millions. Now, the Save America Act is the Save Act with additional things. This is something Donald Trump is pushing for, and he has said he would not sign any additional bills coming out of Congress until it is passed. But it's dead on arrival in the Senate. The Senate is not going to take it up because they can't get it past the filibuster. And even though a few Republicans are willing to nuke the filibuster, they're not going to do it because at some point they are going to be the minority party and they want to use the filibuster to hold it over the Democrats' heads to limit how much the Democrats can do. Because they know at some point, even the most ardent MAGA Republican senator knows at some point they're going to be in the minority party. It may be in 28, it may be in 2050, but they know eventually they are going to lose the Senate again. And they want to make sure that they have a safeguard in place to prevent the Democrats from getting whatever they want. Now, I personally think the Republicans are going to lose the Senate in 28 at the latest. I think they could lose the Senate as early as 26. But now the Save America Act uh, wants to cause nationwide strict voter ID requirements, um, excluding many commonly used IDs like student IDs or public assistance IDs, which some states have, uh, requiring voters to present proof of citizenship when casting a ballot. So you would go in, not only would you have to prove your citizenship when you register to vote, you would have to reprove your citizenship every time you go to vote. And as we've talked about, that would be a poll tax. And not in that you would have to pay money at the time when you go to vote, which is clearly a poll tax, but by requiring you to go get documentation that costs money is a poll tax. And I think it's the 24th Amendment Yeah, it is the 24th Amendment. Um, Says Section 1, the right of the citizens to vote in any primary or other election for president, vice president, or members of Congress shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state by reason of failure to pay any poll tax or other tax. Very simple. So if you owe back taxes, for example, they cannot prevent you from voting. If you owe fines, they cannot prevent you, uh, I believe, from voting. Now, if you are a convicted felon, they can take your rights away. That's different. But charging a fee to go vote is a poll tax, even if that fee is not at the time of voting. Now, the reason it would be a poll tax is these documents that you have to go get are not free. Okay, let's see here. So, depending on how you have to go, it's either 15 for a copy of your birth certificate, for a certified copy, $29 for online requests through Vital Check plus additional state fees, $20 for a certified copy if applying in person. And if your additional fees may apply for online or phone orders. So you're talking about anywhere from $15 to $29, and you have to go get that, or you pay even more money. Now, that would be a poll tax. Okay. You have to re-register or re-show your verification. If you even get all that documentation, you would have to re-show it at the time you go vote, and they could still deny it. So you go vote, you have all your documentation, and it's up to that poll worker to say, no, I don't accept this, and move on. No. They want federal oversight of voter rolls, which is also illegal because in the Constitution, states conduct elections. Period. But they want to direct states to submit voter registration lists to the Department of Homeland Security for verification. Now, what they want is they want a list of people to go after, to intimidate, to try to keep people from voting. And they have criminal penalties for election officials who register voters without proper documentation. It is designed to centralize eligibility checks and enforce stricter identification rules, which could create administrative burdens for state and potentially disenfranchise millions of eligible voters, particularly those without ready access to passports or birth certificates, including young people, low income individuals, and married women who have changed their name. Uh, Now, it has passed, parts of it have passed the House, not all of it. And it's dead in the Senate. It's not going to pass. Now, people are worried Donald Trump is going to enact a executive order doing this. He tried once. Courts blocked it. DOJ did not take up the appeal. And he's talked about doing another executive order. But again, the courts are going to block it. Even if this thing were to pass, which it won't, but even if it were, I can almost guarantee that the courts are going to block it in part because of real world implications. Okay. We are less than 8 months away from the midterm elections. States have already undergone primary elections, and primaries are coming up. Let's see. Let's see which one's next. I think there's one tomorrow or Tuesday, actually. Here we go. Primary calendar. Yes, on Tuesday we have uh, Illinois has their primaries. So there's primaries already going on. Then we go out. Next one to watch after that. Uh, is it until April? April we have New Jersey. Then May is Indiana and Ohio. But few by few, we are going to get uh, states having their primaries and changing these laws as far as who is eligible, how they can vote, etc., is going to screw up things leading into that election. I can almost guarantee that the courts are going to uh, suspend it, that they are not going to allow the SAVE Act if it were even possible for them to get it through the Senate, which again, it's not. They're just not going to do that. Okay. What I think is going to happen. Now, I could be wrong. I've been wrong before because I was convinced Kamala Harris was going to win the election. Everything was pointing that direction and she lost. So, I mean, I could always be wrong. But what I think is going to happen is that it's just dead in the Senate. It's not going anywhere. They're going to keep talking about it, and it's because Donald Trump needs an excuse for why he lost. So when the Republicans lose the House, and they're probably going to lose the House, I mean it's almost a guarantee. It's not if they lose it, it's by how many seats. And based on everything I am seeing, I am convinced it could be by up to as many as 50. Then it's whether or not the Senate flips. Senate could flip. We've talked about it a lot. It's possible. It's a tough chance, but it's possible. And from there, Donald Trump wants an excuse as to why his side lost the midterms. He's always had an excuse. It's always been cheating. Look back to his very first primary, the Iowa caucuses in 2016. He loses to Ted Cruz. Oh, they're rigged. It was rigged against me. They hate Trump. It's rigged against me. He has been using that refrain for 10 years. He is setting up for when they lose the midterms that he is his excuse ready. Well, they cheated in the midterms because they wouldn't pass the SAVE Act. Now, Republican MAGAs, they'll come out and say, well, gee, how, you can only win if by not having voter ID. No, this isn't about whether or not the Democrats can win. This is about Republicans trying to prevent people from voting because they know when voters turn out, people or the Republicans lose. And they're worried about high voter turnout because people are pissed. As I talked about several times on my last couple of lives, both the one I did for yesterday's podcast and the one I did with Pamela, I talked about how uh, it's the economy, stupid. And I got this from Ed, the elder statesman, uh, the guest over on the Rational Boomer podcast. If you're familiar with Boomer's podcast, you would know Ed, and we all love Ed when he comes in. He has an old time wisdom, but he talked about the '92 election with George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton, and I was knee high to a grasshopper during the '92 election. I was old enough to know things were going on. I was old enough to know that an election happened and that Bill Clinton got elected. Um, I think '92. I still was too young. I hadn't started uh, band yet. One of the reasons I loved Bill Clinton, I talked about on the live, is in high school and middle school, I played the alto saxophone, just like Bill Clinton, and I thought it was cool that the president of the United States played the same instrument as I did. Now I haven't touched it in years. I probably sound like shit, but I thought it was cool. But I was still probably too young when he got elected in '92 to even know what was going on with that. I mean, I remember him being referenced in Animaniacs, etc. But I didn't know what was going on. But anyway, Ed was talking about it and how at the time Democrats were convinced that they were going to lose, that HW was going to cruise to reelection. But what happened was the economy took a shit. The economy goes south, and Bill Clinton, who wasn't on anybody's radar to be a potential nominee, wins the nomination. And while he's campaigning, the economy sours, and George H.W. Bush loses. Well, the economy's going south. It's the economy, stupid. And that's what's going on here, right? Economy's doing bad. Or not George, Donald Trump is going to be dealing with the repercussions of it. And they're worried that because the economy's bad, there's going to be high voter turnout and Republicans are going to lose. So that's why they want to pass the SAVE Act. It's about disenfranchising voters in general. And yes, as one of the people on the panel um, kept saying on Panel is Live, it's about disenfranchising women. And it is about disenfranchising women and to an extent also minorities for both. The reality is it's just about disenfranchising voters in general. They want low turnouts because typically when the turnout is lower, it's Republicans that win because they make it a point to go vote. And Republicans, the ones that are the MAGAs in the comments and making videos and things that are saying things like, well, don't you have your documentation? They're already ready for this. And they don't see the problem with it. And because they have their documentation, they think everybody else should have their documentation. And that they're going to make it a point to go vote regardless. They're going to be there. And what Republicans that are elected are hoping for is that if turnout is low and they can disenfranchise a bunch of voters, that they can get reelected. It's their only hope for holding on to power, and they know it, and they're scared. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of the Analytical Iowan Podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. I'm going to be back tomorrow with another podcast. I'll probably do another podcast like this tomorrow, and then either for Tuesday or Wednesday, I may do a TikTok live. Enjoy doing them. I'm just going to have to see if anybody else out of our normal group is doing a live around the time I would sit down and record and do one myself and go from there. So I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. Hope you guys have a great day, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.
That was Eric. That does it for our analysis today. If you appreciated us cutting through the noise to get to the critical context, please make sure you're subscribed to the Analytical Iowan podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.